Hey Gloomers, welcome back to Nerdhaven. My name is Mike, and today we're going to be talking about 3D printing for the Circles class in Gloomhaven. If you haven't already unlocked this class, there's going to be major spoilers in this video, so be forewarned. If you are concerned with spoilers, feel free to come check it out once you've unlocked the class. Now, this is going to be part one of a two-part video series. The first video is going to focus on 3D printing and painting these models. The second video, we'll talk a little bit about at the end. So first, let me just ask, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. But let's take a look at the Summoner Mini that comes with the game. And I like this Mini. I will say mine was a little bent. So if you take a look here, you can see that mine's leaning forward a bit. But given the nature of what this class is, it's sort of mystic, kind of floating around. I just kind of went with it. I probably could have fixed this to straighten it out. If you have a Mini like this and you want to straighten it out, I've read that you can sort of run the Mini under hot water for a bit. It makes it a little flexible and you can probably bend it back into shape. But I actually kind of like the look of this leaning forward. For basing, I actually used some, I pulled apart the end of a Q-tip with some super glue and I just sort of teased it up to create somewhat of a foggy surface. And, other than that, it's just a pretty normal paint job. And from there, we go into printing all the summons that go along with this. So this is a major summoning class. Obviously, it's the Summoner. And there's a whole bunch of minis that you can use to go along with all the cards this class will play. We didn't want to use just the regular base tokens that you use for summoning. That gets boring, confusing. So, one of the things that I wanted to do after printing the terrain tiles and all the obstacles was be able to use this for summons in the game. And so this was a great opportunity once we unlocked it. I will say all of these were printed on an Ender 3 Pro, which is an FDM printer. I've since bought a resin printer because when I started printing enemies, I realized FDM just really wasn't going to be good enough. And I will say that the quality of these turned out fairly well, but resin printer is much better. So if you're thinking about doing this and your quality is important to you, consider getting a resin printer. But for the Summoner, all these summons tend to sort of be non-humanoid, and I find resin printing in particular is much better for humanoid figures where you have a lot of thin limbs and a lot of weapons that are pretty thin and overhang without anything to go below it. That's where resin really starts to shine. So it wasn't as bad for the Summoner class. But again, if I were doing it all over again, these would be printed on resin and they would have come out even better. First summon we'll jump into is the Bat Swarm, and I will admit this is actually not 3D printed by me. I tried 3D printing a bat. This is frankly probably one of the last things that I did before I said I needed a resin printer, but there's so many details with the fine, small bats that move around, and it wasn't working out well. I ended up buying a Reaper miniature for a Bat Swarm, and I used that and painted it as my sub-in for the Bat Swarm. The miniature itself has a tombstone at the bottom and some nice basing that sort of comes with it already, and the bats are flying off of that. And, this was a pretty standard paint job. I gave it a coat and used some dry brushing to bring out some highlights in the tombstone and the bats and on the ground. And the next model is the Living Bomb. So this was the first model that I actually printed for this class, and I wasn't sure which direction I wanted to go in, so I printed out a couple different options. I printed out one that was sort of like a bomb from Final Fantasy, and then I had this guy, and I really ended up liking this one. And the friend of mine who was playing the Summoner liked this better as well. So we went with this one, and I'm really happy with the way this came out. I think it perfectly resembles what a living bomb is supposed to look like. When I painted this, I had a lot of fun painting the flame at the end and layering those different colors to sort of give it a flame-like look. The metallic of the face, I think, helps pop out a little bit from the more matte backing of the bomb itself. Third one here is an Iron Golem, again on an FDM printer. This one's a bit more humanoid. The sword that overhangs here, when I first printed this, did not work out well. It ended up failing in the print, and I actually had to scale it up and print it at a bigger size in order for it to even print successfully. And I'm happy I did, because this thing's supposed to be a big beast, and I think I like the look of it better now that it's so large. But it's bigger than most of the other summons that are out there on the board. Printing on this, again, I used a metallic paint, but I dulled it down with some black to paint most of the model with sort of less of a metallic look. And then I just went over some of the edges with a highlight. And the next ones up are the Shadow Wolves. So there are 2 wolves when you summon with this card. And one of the important rules in Gloomhaven is that you maintain the order of the summons. So these come out at the same time, but one wolf is going to go before the other one, and whichever wolf that is should be the first one to go each time. And if you're following those rules correctly, you need a good way to be able to differentiate between the summons. So that's why I made one sort of have a white coat on the main, and the other one's more of a purple coat. That allows us to differentiate. We know white is always the first one to go, and that helps us keep that in line. So if you're going to be doing something like this yourself, I'd recommend doing the same thing so that you can differentiate between the wolves. So the next one here is the Lava Golem. It's sad that this one doesn't get to see the board all that often because the other half of the card is so critical to the playstyle of the class. But, we've seen it once, and I really like the look of this one. I tried to bring out a little bit of sort of lava in the background and the cracks, but then have more of a rocky surface on the outside. So, I started by going through and painting most of the model yellow, then I put in some red highlights, and then I really went over all the higher levels with brown. So really it's only in the deep cracks that you still see the red and the yellow shining through. All right, and the next one up here is the Thorn Shooter. I was pretty happy with the way this came out. This one sees the board a lot. This is a go-to summon that I think is pretty much going to be played in every scenario, so we get a lot of look at this one. And I was happy with the way it came out. We had a plant style here that sort of sits in the back and shoots thorns out at enemies, and it looks good doing it. All right, and that's it for all of the level 1 summons. So before we take a look at the rest of the cards, if you're enjoying this video, hit the like button below. Appreciate it. So the first one that you unlock as you level up is the Slime Spirit. I was really happy with how this paint job came out. I intentionally didn't go over this with a matte clear coat. Because I think it's important to sort of have a little bit of a shininess on the coat of the ooze, and it reflects really nicely in the light. Really like the way that this came out. And the next one up here is the Rock Colossus. So this is an easy one to paint. It's just an earth elemental for the most part, so painted it a flat brown to start with and gave it highlights and dry brushing as I went around. And then went in with yellow to give it some, nice shining yellow eyes. And the next one we unlock is the Healing Sprite. So this one floats around and heals you, and it's a flying creature. So, the 3D models tend to try to do creative things to make the creature look like it's flying. And so I took that and I put glue on it and just shoved a whole bunch of glitter all over it before we sealed it up. And, that the idea here was to sort of give it a look like it's pixie dust floating off the back of the fairy here. And, overall, I was pretty happy with the way this one came out. I think the FDM printer didn't do a great job with the body or the face, but the wings in particular, I thought actually came out pretty good. And, I like the way that the highlighting reflects off of the, the edges of the wings there. Next up are the Nail Spheres. So this is another one where you actually summon more than one. There's 3 of them. So you'll see that I have a red one, a green one, and a blue one. And again, this helps us keep the order straight. So when these do get summoned, we haven't actually unlocked this level yet, but when they get summoned, we'll be able to keep the order straight if we're going to put this down on the board. All right, and the second to last is the Void Eater. We ended up using a model that I'm pretty happy the way this came out. I wanted to give this sort of a galaxy look, and the way I painted this is I started off with a flat black, then I took some dark purple and dark blue to sort of blotch around the body of the summon, and then I took a little bit lighter blue and a little bit lighter purple to fill in some of the areas to give it a little bit of that sort of cloudy look. And then when I was done, I took a brush and dipped it in some white paint that wasn't watered down, and I sort of just ran my fingers through the bristles to splatter very small, fine white dots on the model to sort of look like stars. I was really happy with the way this came out. This is what I had in mind. It was my vision for it, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work out, but pretty happy with how this one turned out. And the last one, the level 9 card that you can unlock, is the Black Unicorn. And this one, I wanted to go with a black body, but not just have it solid black. I wanted to be able to differentiate some color. So, we gave it somewhat of a glowing white-yellow mane and hoofs and eyes. And, again, I was pretty happy with how this one came out. I'm not sure if we'll ever get to level 9 and we'll see this one on the table, but I wanted to make sure that we had it so that we were ready if we ever got there. And that's all of the 3D prints and painting. You can find the STL files for all of these in the description below, so if you wanted to print these yourself, you can find them and do that. I did mention that this is going to be a 2-part video series, so this first part was to talk about the 3D printing and painting. But when I did this, it was near the start of the pandemic, and my campaign transitioned to Tabletop Simulator, so I had all these models that were sort of just sitting here and not being used. So the second video that I'm going to put out in the next week or two will be showing you how to take either my 3D models, or if you have your own that you've printed that you want to use in Tabletop Simulator, and using something called photogrammetry to bring these in as 3D assets so that you can use them in Tabletop Simulator instead of the cardboard standees that are available there. So if you're interested in that, subscribe so that you can be notified when that video comes out. I'm curious, if you don't already have a 3D printer, is 3D printing something that you've considered? If you're thinking about it and you haven't already done it, leave a comment down below. What's holding you back? I'm curious to hear from you. Otherwise, that's the end of this video. So again, if you like this video, please hit like. If you want to see more of my content, subscribe so you can be notified when more videos are posted. And as always, we'll catch you on the next one.